My name is Miriam Caldwell, and the night my legs snapped like dry winter wood was the night I realized a mother can disappear long before she dies. The fall happened so fast I couldn't understand what had happened, only that the world tilted. The wooden steps rushed up at me, and a sharp crack burst through my body like lightning. I remember lying frozen at the bottom of the staircase, my right leg bent in a direction no leg should ever go, and the taste of iron rising in my mouth as I tried to breathe through the pain. I reached for the railing, shaking, desperate for something solid to hold on to, when I heard footsteps above me, light, impatient, annoyed. It was Emily. She didn't run toward me. She didn't gasp or kneel or reach out. She just stood there in her pressed blouse and soft house slippers, looking down at me the way someone looks at a stain on the floor. "Miriam, come on. You can't be serious," she said, her voice sharp, clipped, almost irritated. I think my leg is broken," I whispered. Instead of helping, she nudged the fallen crutch aside with her foot, the rubber tip scraping against the hardwood. "You always make things bigger than they are," she murmured, and lifted her phone, not to call 911, but to take a picture of me. A flash went off, and pain shot up my side, and somewhere inside me, a quiet thought settled like dust. If my own family can look at me like this, then something in our story has already broken. When the paramedics finally lifted me from the floor, the only thing sharper than the pain in my leg was the look on my son's face when he walked through the door. Shock wasn't what I saw on him. It wasn't fear or concern or even confusion. It was something far smaller, something that stung worse than the fracture itself, irritation. As if I had interrupted his evening rather than broken a bone. He stood there, still wearing his office badge clipped to his belt, the sleeves of his shirt rolled up the way he always did when he was buried in deadlines. For a moment, I thought he might run to me the way he used to when he was little. Back then, if I so much as coughed, he'd scramble across the house shouting, "Mom, are you okay?" But now, at 32, he barely crossed the room. "Mom," he said, exhaling as if he'd come home to a sink full of dirty dishes instead of his injured mother. What happened now? There was a time when those words might have broken me, but lying on that stretcher, gripping the rails to keep myself from shaking, I realized something unsettling. Daniel wasn't the same boy I'd raised, and maybe he hadn't been for a long time. The ride to the hospital blurred into a mix of ambulance sirens and the paramedic's calm voice telling me to breathe. Emily didn't come with us. She'd stayed home, claiming she needed to finish preparing dinner, even though it was already almost 8 o'clock. Daniel rode in the front, silent the entire trip, never once turning around to check on me. At the ER, they confirmed the obvious, a fractured tibia, severe but repairable. They wrapped my leg, scheduled imaging for the morning, and told Daniel I'd need someone to help me for a while, at least until I could manage with a walker. He nodded, but he didn't look at me when they said it. Instead, he stared at the floor tiles, the way a child might stare at a mess he didn't want to clean up. "We'll figure something out." When we got home, Emily was sitting at the kitchen island, scrolling through her phone as if she'd been waiting for a package, not a woman with a broken leg. "How bad is it?" she asked without raising her head. "Bad enough," Daniel muttered. Emily finally glanced my way. Her expression didn't soften. If anything, she looked inconvenienced. "You'll need to stay on the main floor. Then it'll be easier." Easier for whom? I wondered. Certainly not for me. The main floor had no bedroom, no shower, no privacy. But I nodded. Because I was tired and in pain, and too vulnerable to start a fight, I couldn't stand on 2 legs to finish. Daniel set up a makeshift bed on the living room sofa. Emily placed a thin blanket at the end of it, folded with a precision that felt more like a hotel gesture than a caring one. I thanked them both, even though gratitude felt like sandpaper in my mouth. That first night, the house hummed with a kind of cold silence. I listened to the upstairs floorboards creak as Emily walked around. I listened to the faint sound of Daniel's laugh, tired, forced, drifting down the staircase. I lay there staring at the ceiling, trying to ignore the throbbing in my leg and the heavier throbbing in my chest. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when this house was filled with warmth. When Daniel had brought me here last year, he'd said it was our new start. "You'll never be alone again, Mom. Not while I'm around." I believed him. I wanted to. I moved cities, left behind my bookstore job, my friends, even the small apartment I'd spent a decade making into a home. I traded independence for the promise of family, but promises are fragile things, and sometimes they dissolve slowly, quietly, like sugar disappearing into tea. A week before the fall, small things had already started to shift. Emily began sighing whenever I entered a room, the kind of sigh that says more than words ever could. Daniel stopped lingering in the kitchen to talk with me after work, and the spaces I used to occupy freely, my little reading nook by the window, the spare bedroom where I kept my books, felt tighter each day, as if the walls were inching inward. One afternoon, I found Emily reorganizing the spare room, my room, boxing my things with a determination that didn't match her explanation. "We just need the space for storage," she said lightly, sealing a box of my paperbacks with tape. But I saw the truth in the way she avoided my eyes. I saw it in the neat labels she placed on the boxes. Miscellaneous. Old stuff. Mom's things. And I felt it again that night, as I lay on the sofa with my splinted leg propped on a pillow, the house dark except for the hall light glowing upstairs. The sound of Emily's voice drifted down, low and sharp. "I can't keep doing this. Daniel?" she whispered. "She needs more care than we can give, and I'm tired of feeling like a guest in my own home." Guest? The word echoed inside me. I closed my eyes, breathing through the ache in my chest. I didn't know exactly what was coming. Not yet. But I felt the shift, subtle and cold, like a winter breeze slipping through a cracked window. Something was changing in this house. And deep down, I knew it wasn't in my favor. The next few days blurred together in a way that only pain and quiet humiliation can. I pretended not to hear the whispered conversations upstairs, the ones that paused whenever I shifted on the sofa or the floor creaked under my walker. I tried to stay small, use less, need less, speak less, because something in the atmosphere had changed, and I didn't want to make it worse. Still, the house told its own story, even when no one spoke. Emily stopped leaving the kitchen light on for me at night, even though she knew I couldn't climb stairs to drink water. Daniel rushed out earlier each morning, slipping out the door before I fully woke, and as the hours stretched long and empty, I began to feel like an unwanted guest occupying borrowed space. One afternoon, while I was trying to balance myself enough to heat a bowl of soup, Emily walked in, holding her tablet and a file of printed papers. She didn't ask how my leg was. She didn't ask if I needed help with the pot trembling in my hand. She simply leaned against the counter with that clean, cool posture she always had, and watched me. "I talked to someone today," she said in a voice too light, too rehearsed. "A care coordinator, just to get information." My heart tightened. "Information about what?" "Options," she replied, tapping her tablet as if the word meant nothing. "In-home assistance, part-time aides, assisted living placements, nothing decided, just possibilities." It was the kind of explanation meant to sound gentle, responsible, even loving. But the truth was tucked between her words like a thorn. "You think I can't live here," I said quietly. "I think," she answered, choosing every syllable with careful precision, "that this house needs stability, routine, predictability, which is hard right now." My soup nearly slipped from my hand. I steadied myself against the stove. My breath caught somewhere between indignation and a deeper, more familiar fear, the fear of becoming a burden. Daniel came home later, and I brought it up while he helped me lower myself onto the sofa. "Your wife talked to someone about placement." He froze mid-movement, then forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "She's just stressed. She didn't mean anything by it." But he didn't deny it, and he didn't ask what she'd said. That silence told me more than any explanation could. That night, when the house finally quieted, I reached for the blanket around my shoulders and heard something upstairs. A door closing gently, a voice muffled but tense. Daniel's? Then Emily's. I couldn't make out the words, but the cadence alone was enough to twist my stomach. It was the rhythm of two people discussing a shared problem, one they wanted solved, and I was the problem. The next morning, I woke early, the living room dim and blue with dawn light. I tried to stand before the pain reminded me that healing bones demand patience. I reached for my crutch and felt something odd tucked behind the sofa cushion, a folded pamphlet. I pulled it out with trembling hands. Meadowview Senior Living. My name wasn't listed anywhere on it, but I didn't need it to be. The image on the cover, an elderly woman smiling in a wheelchair, a cheerful nurse behind her, was enough. So was the small, sticky note attached to the back, scribbled in Emily's handwriting. "Ask Daniel." My hands went cold. Later that evening, while Emily was out and Daniel was in his office downstairs, I knocked lightly on his door. He looked up, startled, as if I'd caught him in something private, which told me I absolutely had. "I found this." I placed the brochure on his desk. "Why is this in the house?" He swallowed, rubbed the back of his neck, then sighed the way he used to sigh as a boy when he broke something he didn't want to confess to. "Mom, you need more help than we can give right now." "No," I whispered. "What I need is my son." He closed his eyes, and for a moment, I thought he might reach for me. But instead, he leaned back in his chair, avoiding my gaze entirely. "This is temporary," he said, a lie dressed as reassurance. "Just until your leg heals." But I heard the finality buried underneath those words, the quiet decision that had been building long before my fall. As I left his office, the ache in my chest throbbed harder than the fracture in my leg, because for the first time, I realized something I had never allowed myself to consider. The life I gave up to move here, the home I left, the independence I surrendered, might never be returned to me. And somewhere upstairs, in a house that used to feel like a promise, someone had already begun planning a future that no longer included me. The morning Daniel handed me the walker instead of the crutch, something in his eyes had shifted. It wasn't anger or even impatience. It was guilt, thin, uneasy, and quickly hidden. He mumbled something about stability and safety, but it wasn't about my leg. It was about control, about making sure I moved slower, that I stayed where they needed me to stay. As I made my way across the living room, the wheels squeaking across the hardwood, I caught Emily watching me from the hallway. Her arms were crossed, her expression unreadable. For a second, I wondered if she felt remorse, even a flicker of concern. But then she turned away before I could tell. That afternoon, a social worker arrived at the door. Her presence wasn't entirely unexpected. After all, the signs had been appearing like breadcrumbs, but seeing her standing there with a clipboard made my stomach twist. She introduced herself as just doing a quick wellness check, her smile warm but trained. Emily welcomed her in with polite enthusiasm, offering coffee and gesturing toward the living room where I sat. I felt exposed under the social worker's gentle eyes as she asked questions designed to seem harmless. How was my appetite? Did I feel safe? Was I able to manage basic tasks alone? Was I confused lately? Emily hovered in the doorway, chiming in softly at moments that didn't need her voice. "She forgot the stove on last week," she said at one point. "That isn't true," I replied sharply. The social worker turned back to me, her expression neutral but attentive. "It's okay," she said. "Sometimes the mind gets overwhelmed during recovery." Emily nodded sympathetically, as if she were the one suffering. The social worker left after half an hour. She thanked Emily for her supportive involvement and suggested they all keep in close contact over the next few weeks. When the door shut behind her, the house fell into an eerie quiet. I looked at Emily. "Why are you doing this?" She tilted her head slightly, almost pitying. "We're trying to help you, Miriam. You can't keep pretending everything is fine." "But it is fine," I insisted. "My leg is broken, not my mind." She gave a small, knowing smile that chilled me. "That's what we're trying to prevent." Those words lingered like smoke long after she walked away. Later that night, the sound of typing drifted from Daniel's office. Curiosity tugged at me, then fear. I shouldn't have gone to the doorway, I knew that, but something inside me needed to see, needed confirmation, needed truth. Daniel sat hunched over his desk, the glow of the laptop screen highlighting the tension in his jaw. His phone was on speaker. I heard a man's voice, a calm, professional tone. "So to proceed," the man said, "we'll need her evaluation forms signed. The cognitive assessment will establish limited capacity, which makes the transition smoother legally. It's standard in cases like this." My heart hammered. Daniel rubbed his forehead. I want this to be as painless as possible. She's been struggling, and Emily can't handle the stress anymore." Struggling? The word hit me like another fall down another staircase. The man continued. "Once the placement is confirmed, she can move to Meadowview as early as next month. It's a good facility. Clean. Safe." Daniel exhaled deeply, a long and tired breath. "Okay, send me the documents. I'll sign them." I gripped the door frame to steady myself, the walker slipping slightly out of reach. My breath caught in my throat, and my vision swam, not from physical pain, but from a deeper cut, one that severed something nothing could mend. Daniel wasn't being manipulated. He wasn't being tricked. He had decided. I backed away before he could notice me, my heart beat loud in my ears. I made it back to the sofa, sank into the cushions, and let the truth settle around me, heavy and suffocating. They weren't waiting for my leg to heal. They weren't weighing options. They were preparing to remove me, not for my safety, not for my health, but because my presence, my existence, had become too inconvenient. Later that night, I lay awake listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator, the creak of floorboards upstairs, and the soft murmur of Daniel's voice as he told someone, a friend, perhaps, that he hoped this was the right decision. I closed my eyes, and for the first time since moving into this house, I didn't feel like family. I felt like a task, a burden, a project to be managed, and somewhere deep inside me, a quiet understanding crystallized. If I didn't find a way to hold on to myself, I would lose more than my home. I would lose my life as I knew it. The conversation that changed everything began on a morning far too calm for what it carried. I woke to the sound of dishes clinking softly in the kitchen and sunlight spilling through the blinds in thin stripes. For a moment, I let myself pretend things were normal. Then I saw Daniel standing a few feet away, his hands tucked into the pockets of his jeans, his shoulders pulled tight. His expression told me he hadn't slept. "Mom," he said quietly, "can we talk?" Emily hovered near the dining table, not sitting, not leaving, just watching. Her presence alone made my stomach tighten. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't conflicted. She looked settled, as if a decision had been reached and all that was left was to deliver it. Daniel took a breath. "Meadowview has a room available." I blinked. "For who?" He swallowed. "For you?" The words landed with a weight I felt in my bones. I tried to straighten myself, tried to keep the tremor out of my voice. "Daniel, my leg is healing. I can manage." "It's not just about the leg," Emily cut in, her tone soft but stripped of warmth. "You need structure, support, a place where people can look after you properly." I stared at her. "You mean a place that isn't here?" She didn't deny it. Daniel stepped closer. "It'll be temporary, just until you're steady again." "That's not what the papers were for," I said. "I heard you. I know what you signed." He froze, guilt flickering across his face. "Mom, please." A long silence stretched between us, thick enough to feel outside. A passing car hummed down the street, reminding me that the world kept moving even as mine threatened to collapse. "You went without telling me," I said. "You visited the place." "I needed to be sure it was safe," he replied, his voice cracking. "I didn't want you to feel abandoned." "But you are abandoning me." He shut his eyes at that, and for a moment he looked impossibly young. But when he opened them again, the decision was still there, fixed behind them like a locked door. Emily stepped closer to him, resting a hand lightly on his arm. "This is the right thing, Daniel, for everyone." Her touch, gentle, steady, was a reminder that I had already lost this battle long before it began. I turned my eyes toward her. "Are you pregnant?" She stiffened, and Daniel's eyes widened, confirming what their words had not. Emily gave a small, controlled nod. "We weren't ready to share, but yes, and I can't go through stress like this again." Stress. That was all I had become to her. Daniel's voice dropped to a whisper. "I have to take care of my family." I felt something hollow open inside me. "I am your family." He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The truth hung in the room between us. He had already chosen which family needed him more. I looked down at my hands, at the faint tremor I couldn't hide. Fighting would do nothing. Begging would humiliate me. So I inhaled slowly, letting the breath steady what was left of my pride. "When do I leave?" I asked. Daniel hesitated, then said, "Monday. The transport is arranged." Emily folded her arms, relieved the hard part was over. "But Daniel..." Daniel looked shattered. I nodded once, quietly. "I understand." But inside, the fracture wasn't in my leg anymore. It was in the space between a mother and her son, something far more painful and far less likely to heal. Moving into Meadowview felt less like arriving somewhere new and more like stepping into the quiet aftermath of a life I no longer recognized. Yet as the days unfolded and the rhythm of the place settled around me, the gentle shuffle of residents in the hallway, the soft hum of televisions behind half-open doors, I began to find a kind of steadiness I hadn't felt in months. It wasn't home, not in the way Daniel's house was supposed to be, but it was a place where no one sighed when I entered a room, where no one measured my presence like weight on a scale. Sometimes, in the late afternoons when the sun warmed the common room windows, I would sit with a book in my lap and think about the moment I said yes to leaving. I used to wonder if I'd made a mistake, but slowly, I began to understand something quieter, something I might have missed if life hadn't forced me to stop. I wasn't just being pushed out, I was being redirected. The hurt hasn't vanished, and maybe it never will. But in this unexpected stillness, I am learning that dignity isn't given or taken by others. It grows back, slowly, the moment you decide you deserve to keep it.